Welcome to the Interview Podcast, the voice of InterCT. InterCT's aim is to help young athletes become excellent individuals through the vehicle of soccer. Love the game, love to learn, and love to compete at InterCT.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Interview Podcast. Joining me, I'm Aaron Mazzola. Joining me today, I have Tom Robinson. How you doing, Tom?
Good. Still, just us two fighting through it this week, mate. We've run out of guests, so it's a pleasure to be ever present, and looking forward to sharing some information with our families and going over a few things as usual.
Yeah, of course. And it's just us, but I think we can do a pretty good job here. So, but in the next, the upcoming weeks, I'm looking to get some interesting podcast guests on. Give us a different perspective on certain topics that we talk about.
And not to jinx it, because I do good at this, but we might have a special guest next week making his debut appearance. The co-owner of the club, Mr. Marty Walker. So we had a staff meeting this morning, and he said he wants to be on the next one to talk about some of the exciting international tour options that we have throughout the club. So if you are interested in tours and international travel with the club, make sure you check in next week. And the hardest thing me and Aaron will have to do is to keep Marty to his word on his availability for next week to record the podcast.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've been on a couple tours with a couple other clubs, and it's always, as a player as well as a coach, but it's always a great experience. It's always a great experience, seeing a different country, playing with and against, players from a different country at different levels and stuff. So definitely something to look into, and we'll get into it more in detail next week. But for this week, we had, the Poughkeepsie tournament, and we've been talking about that for the previous couple of weeks now. But let's give a little recap on the tournament. It wasn't the best weather in the world.
Yeah, I was going to say the recap could just be wet.
Yeah.
That'd be it. Very wet.
It was really, the morning on Saturday, it wasn't terrible. It was sprinkling a little bit. And then once that first game in the afternoon, then it just, all the skies opened up and it just poured down on all of us, and the wind was nuts. And
yeah, I think to recap overall, I think most of our morning teams did pretty well. My 2015 RL played some outrageous football at times, and they won their bracket pretty comfortably, winning most games by 4 or 5 goals. They did really well. That is a pretty special group, so I'm interested to see how they can do when we can get them into a few harder tournaments and competitions down the line. But they are currently undefeated throughout the season in the Zone 1. So I wasn't expecting him to have too many issues in Poughkeepsie. Imadi had his 14 RL play upper bracket. They did really well, made it to the final, lost a heartbreaker on penalties.
Heartbreaker.
It is the worst way to lose a game. Yeah. I borderline probably just play rock, paper, scissors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To figure out who wins at that age group. Because if you're that kid who misses that penalty, it's never a good feeling. But, there has to be a winner and a loser at a tournament. Who else did well? Coach Sean's group did really well. Again, they was playing up an age group. They played the first ever format 11v11. Managed to get to the final. In the final, same thing, got to the penalties. And it was actually on the field closest to me where I was coaching. And I do know Jack, who you coach also on the 13s. He made a few great penalty saves to keep those guys in it and help get them over the line. And then
they played 11v11 for the 4 games in the tournament, but for the penalties, they went back to 99 goals, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's just what Poughkeepsie likes to do. They like to keep things a little bit keep you on your toes, keep it interesting. And again, it was great to see him make some saves. And I know one of the dads got a great picture of all the kids arm in arm huddled up on the halfway line just to show how close the group is. So that was good. And then another one, Anthony's guys, the 2010 SL team, they were it's weird. Like in New York, that you can still play high school soccer and club soccer at the same time. So they were actually playing against U15s. So they were actually playing against high school kids.
Wow.
And I managed to win the tournament. They got to the final and won 2-0. So from a morning slate, you know, if he was basing it on winners, then we did do pretty well. Teams winning it, getting to the final, and then our other teams that were up there that unfortunately didn't win. I think overall had a good, fun experience. You know, like I said, that the tournament is fun, enjoyable. Obviously, the weather threw a little curveball in there, but you know, it was good for them guys to get up there and just play. And it is so fast that, you know, they have a little bit of fun between the games and they play again and a little bit more fun. So it is enjoyable. So the morning, no issues, no complaints at all. I thought it went pretty well. Then unfortunately, the afternoon struck. I think looking back at it, big picture, obviously we don't control the tournament, but if they could have just cancelled it from after that morning session would have finished. My biggest frustration that I've expressed to the tournament was some of our families traveled, the union families especially, have traveled the best part of 2 hours and 20 minutes, and they played a 25-minute game. So, like, for us, it's not worth it. So they've traveled 4 hours there and back to play 25 minutes. So that was the frustrating part on our behalf. The tournament was just like, we just wanted to offer an opportunity to play. We thought, you know, we could power through. But you know, at least they got a game in. We'll touch on it a little bit more, but that will not be, that 25-minute game will not be just your tournament for the year. We will discuss a little bit further on other options that we are looking at. And then on the boys' side, a shout out to the 2010 RL team. Again, we mentioned them a little bit last week. They're a good group. They have, you know, solid 10 to 13, 14 ECRL/USL quality players on their team. So Poughkeepsie would have been a little bit too easy for them. So we actually sent them to the FSA tournament where they played against FSA, the ECRL 10s, ECRL 11s, Revolution and Beachside. And they went full length and they went undefeated the whole entire time and won their bracket as well. And it was good for those guys because they also got to work with Coach Colin during the Saturday sessions because Quinny was up with us in Poughkeepsie, and then Anthony got there on Sunday to help them out. And they also did it without a goalkeeper. Swabo, our main guy on that team, the goalie, got a knee injury late Friday night, and those guys showed great team bonding and kind of just took it in turns, jumping in the goal and kind of took care of business. So, you know, if they had a healthy goalkeeper who could have played the whole entire time, I think it would have been even easier for the guys. So, you know, extra shout out to the guys that jumped in goal. And overall from the teams that finished the tournament, I think we had at least 6 winners. So not too bad overall.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, majority of that 2010 RL team plays on the USL pre-academy as well, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So it's a very strong age group, the 2010s, and we see that throughout some other age groups that we have. You said the 2015s are a strong age group, 2013s are a strong age group. You know, there's a bunch of different age groups that can play. For my 2013 EDP and SL on Saturday, they both came in third place. So not the best result in the world, also not the worst. You know, won the last 2 games that each team played. So, you know, I think it's important to lose. And, you know, in Poughkeepsie, we always do fairly well. So some failure, some success in that tournament, I think is a good thing. And then my 2013 RL and 2010 EDP played 1 game, and Tom and I were sitting on the sideline for the 2013 RL game. And as the rain came over, I looked over at Tom, and Tom and myself, we both kind of confused as to why we're playing this game, and, you know, miserable that, all right, all of the clothes that I'm wearing now, including my socks and shoes, are soaked. And we thought we were going to have to get through that whole tournament, another 8 games.
Yeah, it would have been tough.
But as Tom said, we will be looking for other tournaments to send the teams that didn't play on Saturday and Sunday. We'll be looking for other tournaments to send them to. We're looking for something that's a little bit more local than, say, a Poughkeepsie for some families 2 hours away. So maybe it's in Stratford, maybe it's over in Farmington. We're unsure of where and when, but we are looking to get a tournament to, fulfill that tournament for during the fall season.
Yeah, Aaron's 100% right. When we send these offers out to players to join us, we promise a tournament in the fall, a tournament in the spring. Obviously, this year now, with what happened last weekend, it might be tough for us to find one in the fall. So it might be November, December, maybe even early into the new year, but we will get you 2 tournaments throughout the course of the year. The issue that we have is just trying to figure out where we can get the staff. So we have tournaments on our radar, but for example, Anthony and Aaron might already be committed somewhere else to a USL tournament that we can't pull them away from. So we are looking at it. We do have options, potentially like a Black Friday tournament indoors in Stratford, but it's just difficult because we don't want to do a tournament if it doesn't work for at least 80% of the team. We don't want to go to a tournament with half the team missing. So we are looking at that, and also tournaments over the winter, because we will practice heavily over the winter as well. So it might be a good way to do that and add in there. So we are looking at it. We will share more information when we've highlighted them. We just got to figure out the teams that we've got to get there. And same on the girls' side. Coach Gene's working behind the scenes to try and find out options for the girls' side. And I know Stephen's doing exactly the same thing for the union groups as well. So you will get something. It's just, it might be less club-centric than a Poughkeepsie tournament where everybody's there. It might be, okay, Aaron's taking his 13 RL here. Anthony's taking his team here. Sean's doing this here. Amadi's doing this here. Just, it might not be everybody at one location that we like to do, but with the hand we was dealt, that, we just got to kind of think on the fly and find a tournament that works for the coach, and then make sure it works for the players and families.
Right. Yeah. And we wanted to give a little shout out to Leon and to some of the coaches over in Litchfield, Shelton, Milford, the Union branch that, found out their tournament on Sunday was canceled, and they got something for the girls over in Norwalk to go and play. So we are always looking to get our programs and get our teams playing. And that's just one example of, getting bad news Sunday morning or Saturday night, whenever it was, and then right away turning around and saying, oh, we can play here. And they got a jamboree for the girls on Sunday. So that was a nice little event, I heard.
Yeah, I think it's credit to the directors, but also the investment in the club from Leon and Marty regarding the turf. If we don't have that turf, our fields are the same as every other grass field in Connecticut that isn't usable. So yeah, basically what happened, the email went out, the tournament is going to be cancelled late Saturday night. I'm thinking it was around 9 or 10 o'clock the email went out, which we was grateful for, because originally when we spoke to the tournament, they were talking about cancelling at 7 or 8 o'clock, which doesn't help anybody traveling. So at least they considered that. So they did the early cancellation, and credit to the guys up at Litchfield. I know Dave was heavily involved with it. And then Steve and Gene, Steve, obviously the union director, and Gene, the girls director here in Norwalk, that they were able to put something together. So they came into All Saints, got the small goals out, and just played a little jamboree. So at least the kids got an opportunity to play, because actually the weather was nice on Sunday.
Yeah,
I was still up in Poughkeepsie because I've got family up there, and I was the apple picking, and it was beautiful. But obviously the damage was done Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, where it didn't stop raining all night. So yeah, credit to those guys, because if you did just look out of the window on Sunday, be like, oh, why was it cancelled? But yeah, no, for two people who were stood on those fields at, what was it, like 2:30 when we left, there wasn't much field left.
No, I thought that a couple of my players were going to get lost in some of those sinkholes that were out there.
Yeah, it was grim. It was grim. I feel an extra special shout out to our goalkeepers, because the kids that were stood in the rain doing that, I think they deserve it. Deserve an extra shout. I was staring at Jack on your team, and I was going, feel bad for this kid. And then I watched Amari's game, and I was watching Cruzy and go for the 14s. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I can't run around. We can't make a sub. We can't put extra layers on him. So yeah, no, a special shout out to our goalkeepers that powered through those few games that we did play Saturday.
Definitely. It was my 2013, speaking of Jack, he played for the 2012s and the 13 RL. But Jack, he took a nap, 20 minutes prior to the kickoff of the 2013 game, and it looked like he was still sleeping, but made a bunch of good saves, and the RL team played very, very well in there.
Yeah, we do have to give a special shout out as well to those guys that did double bubble.
Yeah,
they did morning and afternoon. So Jack was one of those guys. He was saving penalties for the 2012 team, and then took a little snooze and then got back on the credit. Because if that was me, I probably would have told my mum, let's do this snooze on our way back to Connecticut and not go back in that. So fair play to getting out and playing. But yeah, overall for what happened, it was a disappointing weekend for players not playing. Again, the tournament cancellation isn't on us. It's totally on there. We are working to figure out next steps on that. We do thank everyone who got up there early Saturday morning to play with us, and hopefully had a fun tournament up there. And then really happy with the guys using the All Saints facility for at least something on Sunday for the girls. So yeah, overall, we did the best that we was dealt, and then we're going to try and move forward and now find these new tournaments that we can start promoting. But yeah, between now and the end of the physical soccer year, which is usually in May, early June, you will get your 2 tournaments.
Yep, definitely. And now we can talk about some of the older players. We have 3 teams at the 2010 age group that there's some that are a little too young, some are, at the right age. But next year they will be going into high school. And there's some in that 2010 age group, it happens every year. We have a couple 2009s in now that aren't necessarily old enough to go into high school or play high school age soccer. So they're coming to train in with the 2010s, and they're allowed by the league to play with our 2010s because of their technical age group and where they were, what month they were born in. But we have a bunch of 2010s that are asking what they want to do or what they can do, as they won't necessarily be allowed to play in high school. So what are some of the offerings that Inter has for the 2010 age groups, and what can they do if they're not really able because of their age? What can they do to play?
Yeah, so this basically, I brought this point up to Aaron just to cover, because most people know I spent a lot of time coaching the 2010, so I'm still pretty close with most of the players and the family. So I've started having a few conversations with a few of those people, and we just wanted to cover it on here because what I'm being told is there are a few kids that fall into that. So if your son isn't going, or daughter, for example, this could also happen on the 2010 girls team. If they aren't going to high school next fall, then there are a few options for them. Typically, and this is the only year that it's not happened with the 09s, typically we have enough players to create a team just for the fall. So because we have over 60 kids on the high school on the 2010 side, I wouldn't expect all of them to go to high school. So I think 1 or 2 of them in there, we probably would have enough, hopefully, to make a team. And what they would do is they would just have their own team, and it would be a mixture of the RL guys, the SL guys, the EDP guys. It's not just going to be one team with 5 kids on it. The goal is we just put them all together. They play in an EDP local league, kind of just inside Fairfield County. They don't do any regional soccer in there. And then they would play with that team for kind of September through till Thanksgiving. Once Thanksgiving is done, then they would join their normal team. So if you're an RL player, you would go back to your RL team. EDP players would go back to their EDP players. And then they would just start their normal high school season once all the other high school kids are back. So that's option 1. Option 2 is if we don't have enough 2010s, and what's kind of happened this year with the 2009s, is they would join one of the 2011 teams. They would practice with the 2011 teams. And if somebody's missing that weekend or they need an extra player, they would jump in and play in those games. So the U14 bracket in the fall is technically U14, U15 bracket. So right now, some of our, like Aaron's EDP team, you are playing against kids that are born 2009, because there will be some clubs in there that has one or two 2009s that aren't going high school just yet. So they play on that team. And that's how it works. And then once we get into the winter, into the spring, then everyone plays their own age group. Another option is kids decide not to play on their freshman team, or they don't make a freshman team, or they just decide, I'm not physically ready to play high school soccer. Then they can just still play with us as well. So it doesn't only have to be, I believe it's 8th grade. I'm terrible with the structure of sophomore, freshman grades and all that stuff over here, but I'm pretty sure it's 8th grade. So if your kid is in 8th grade and they obviously aren't going to high school, then they can do this. But also if your kid is 9th grade and going to high school, but they don't want to play the soccer team because for whatever reason, they can still play with us here at Inter. Or you might go to a high school where they don't have that many teams and you're just not in the pecking order to make a JV or a varsity, obviously, then, you can come back and play. So there will be some form of soccer for the 2010s that don't go to high school next fall.
Right. Oh, okay. That's a good distinction to make, if you choose not to, or whether you're not selected or you physically are not going to high school, then there's always an option. And
yeah, because a lot of there's homeschooled kids, there's kids who go to programs that don't have soccer teams. So
right.
whatever there is out there, we'll definitely have something. Hopefully it's in a league format. If not, it'll be training as much as we can and using you sparingly on the weekend if we need players.
And coaches are always, especially for Inter, we always try to accommodate. Even at the 2013 age group, I have plenty of kids that, can't make a session on Wednesday, so they come to double up on Tuesday. And I've seen, there's a couple 2009s that I've seen that have contacted me and contacted Anthony or Colin to go into a session, say on a Wednesday night or something like that, because they don't have anything and they're not playing high school. So there are always options for your son or daughter to come and play.
Yeah, I think just before we move on there, mate, I think a good one is, Aaron just said it. Unfortunately, the 2010s are going to age out from myself, Aaron, Anthony. They're going to start being in part with Colin and Marty. So if you do have any questions or you want more information regarding next year, they're your guys to speak to, because Colin will have a good idea of who is in that window where they aren't going to high school. He'll have a good idea of who's in there and what the teams will be. And then on the girls' side, Ashley's our new girls high school director. She'll be doing the same thing, but also she still coaches that 2010 girls team. So she'll be heavily involved and know what that looks like as well. So yeah, myself, Aaron and Quinny on the boys' side, we might not have all the answers on that one. So if you need help with Marty and Colin mainly, there'll be good ones. And that's why Colin is around a little bit more in the fall, just so we can start figuring out and learning about kids that are going to be in his program next year. It's a good little transition window for him.
Yeah, no, of course. And so now that we've spoken about the high school, we can talk about a little bit about our extra time that we have. And if you don't know what extra time is, I've coached extra time before. Tom has, now Imade. Everyone that coaches at Inter has done an extra time session, one time or another. But what it really is a supplemental individual or supplemental group training for players that want more touches on the ball, want sort of that one-on-one kind of session where you get instant feedback right away, got a bunch of touches on the ball, not so much tactically, but very, very technically influenced training sessions. And they're done at Sports Performance U, which is in Wilton. They have this, very short turf that the ball moves really quick. So ball control at the end of it from players that I've seen that have done it, they're technically a lot more proficient at the end compared to when they start, because they're getting, it's, even though it's only an hour a week, it's 6 hours throughout, 6 weeks or whatever it is. But the touches on the ball are invaluable, especially when you're getting 200 plus, whatever it is. So I know that Coach Imade is trying to take on an important role with the extra time. But Tom, what's your experience like with the extra time that we do at SPU?
Yeah, I think we have briefly touched on it in the previous. Like, it on paper, it looks like we spend a lot of time with these kids, but when you break it down, it's not that long. You know, oh, he's doing soccer 4 times a week, but then when you break it down, he's doing soccer 6 hours a week, 8
6 hours.
hours a week. It's a very different way of reading into it. So with these extra time programs, and that's obviously a tie into a soccer thing. Once a game finishes, you go into extra time, but it's also extra time as in we can get extra touches on the balls. Players that have done it, that have been on my teams, usually end up finding themselves towards the top end of the roster, or end up moving from a second team to a top team, third team to a second team. One thing that I really like about it, most of our kids are technically pretty good. What extra time allows them to do is gain that confidence. Because what they'll start doing is they'll have that coach watching every single touch that they make. And that's where the positive feedback, the positive reinforcement comes from. And then ultimately that usually leads to them being confident enough to try it on the game. So that's what I really like about it. I used to do a lot of one-on-one coaching and small group coaching, obviously, before my son was here. And that was basically my message to the parents. You know, you can grab a coach anywhere and they'll coach your kid, but are they fully invested in them, or are they just putting on a session that looks really good, but they're not really teaching them? So that's what I like about the extra time. It has a good curriculum set by Leon and Amadi, and then kids that do it usually move through. So, you know, we're starting to get to that middle point of the season. Parents are starting to ask us, what can my son or daughter do better? How do they get more touches? And I know Coach Anthony talks about it all the time, is we need them to do more. If you want to be an academy player, a USL player, a high school player, a college player, you're not going to be able to get there with just the 8 hours that you're going to get from your clubs. You've got to put in more and more work. And some people are lucky enough to be able to do that at home. You know what I mean? They might have brothers and sisters, parents that are coaches or played, but most people, that this is a good format. And it is not a big commitment. You know what I mean? It is one of those where it's just only 6-week windows. And then you come in, you get coached for an hour. The only thing I want to message, though, it is limited spots. So, you know, it's not like one of those where we're going to take 18 kids in there. I think it's maximum anywhere between 4 and 6 players. Usually we like to be around 5 or 4 players. But I think 6 is our maximum. And yeah, it's not scrimmages. You're not going to come in and scrimmage. We might not even scrimmage at all.
You probably won't even play.
Yeah, it's just touches. So like for me, if I was doing it, I'd spend a good 2 weeks on control, receiving on the back foot, a good 2 weeks on passing, and then the final 2 weeks on kind of moves to beat an opponent and ways I can move my body to you know, fool other people. So it is a great format, you know, and so many kids that have done it are the ones that are being successful now. The kids who are starting to push on, you know, there's a few kids that I know of in the 2010 team that, you know, they really just wanted to get better at certain things. They registered for it. They told the coaches, and the coaches have been able to work on that as well. So, you know, it is a good thing to do. And Amadi is trying his best to do it so that it doesn't clash when practices. You know, it's very difficult because not all teams practice on the same day. So there might be some crossover. But if you're desperate to do it, you can always reach out to Leon or Amadi and say, hey, my son's a 2013. He can't make that session. Could he jump in with the 14s? Could he jump in with because it's not a team event. It's an individual event. Right. So don't be afraid of, it doesn't work for my schedule. Just reach out. And even it could be co-ed. You know what I mean? We do have it set so it's boys and girls separately. But when they start to get, you know, some of them just don't even care. You know, they just want to play soccer, and then it doesn't matter. And sometimes it's also good to have that a little bit of competition amongst them, because I know when we've done that in the summer camps, you know, it is good trying to see the girls get one over on the boys and vice versa as well. So yeah, if you're looking for extra touches between I think the next block starts kind of late next week. If you're trying to get extra touches between now and the end of the season, that's a great one. And then we have another one starting after Thanksgiving as well. Yeah.
Well, I grew up, you know, obviously now we've spoken about it a couple of times, but my brother plays USL League One, 3rd division, and he's a professional soccer player. And so we grew up thinking that, you had to reach that 10,000 hours. There's this saying 10,000 hours and then you become a professional. Um, Increasingly, I don't think that's the case anymore. But it's very important to note that, some of the best players in the world, or even some of the best players on your team or teams that we play against, a lot of the time, soccer is their only sport. And it's something that they do not just at training, but they come home from soccer and or from school and they're playing soccer, whether it's passing the ball against the wall, whether it's, juggling, whether it's trying different tricks, whether it's just hitting long balls to a friend. And this is something that I used to do when I was growing up. I'm pretty sure, Tom, you can add to that as well, coming from one of the biggest soccer playing countries in the world. It's not just at training, and extra time is really good, as I think we keep saying the same thing, but it's really good to get those extra touches on the ball. And it's not like something you can play soccer at home for sure, but you have your coach coaching you. You have coaches that know you or have heard about you coaching you from the same club. So even if Coach Imade isn't coaching his boys, Imade can coach one of my boys and say, hey, Aaron, Oliver did really well on Tuesday, whatever it was, So if I'm not mistaken here, I believe we have something to release now for our podcast listeners that want to get involved.
Correct. So we want to use this as a reward to those very few people that do listen to me and Aaron waffle on our podcast, and hopefully this will drive more people. We want to use this as a source of promoting things. So if anybody registers between this going out on Friday and before the session start later next week, we're going to offer you a promotional discount code where you'll get 10% off. And all you need to do is use the word podcast and then the number 10 at the end, and then you would get 10% off at checkout. So
the capital P?
Capital P. When you get to the checkout page at the end, it'll say, do you have any codes or promotional codes to use? In the capital P podcast and then the number 10, and that'll get you 10% off for that. And if that works well, then we'll probably start doing that, because we do have more winter programs to talk about. We actually have an election day camp that we're going to try and run for the first time in our history. And we'll start obviously talking about those a little bit later down the line. So if this one works well, we might even start doing more of those down the line. Yeah. So if you want to take part in extra time, we'll be sharing the link with you guys very soon. And to get that 10% off, it's just podcast 10, capital P on podcast, and then the number 10 at the end.
Great. And, this is something, this podcast we're doing isn't just so that we can promote our programs. It is, of course, we're promoting an extra time right now, but we're trying to get away from the newsletter. And I think we've, spoken about this before. And we want to promote this in the sense that, it's passive. You can passively listen to it. You can laugh at our jokes, or you can decide whether I make sense or not, or, you can get certain information that you wouldn't necessarily get from a newsletter, but, from spoken word from our mouths to your ears. But, we want to, I guess, reward some of the people that, do see this as a valuable resource and who have been listening.
Yeah, it made me laugh on Saturday morning, like 7:30, whatever time I was at the field. One of my 2015s ran up to me and went, "Coach Tom, I'm so glad you're okay. I was worried because you didn't read your, the warning sign thing that was going off in the last podcast we recorded."
Yeah.
And because you could hear the horns going off all the time. And he was like, "I'm so glad you guys are okay." So just actually knowing that kids have listened to it, or families have passed on the information, it does help a lot. And it is a good tool and a good resource that we like to use, and it's just a good way to get it out to you guys. So yeah, thank you for listening, and obviously if that takes off, then great. And then any more interaction we can get from parents, what you want to hear, what you want us to talk about, then please reach out.
Any questions you have, any comments that you want to share,
any coaches that you want to have on the podcast, we'll force them to get on here.
Yeah, we can get them on there for sure. That would be interesting if, we say, oh, Ash, get some of Ashley's girls that want to get her on the podcast, or Jean's already been on here, but maybe Colin. Yeah, we're always looking for some new guests. And once my brother, he just clinched the playoffs.
Nice.
So they have one more regular season game, and then I think their season ends late October, early November. So before our season ends, I'm going to try to get him on, have him Zoom or something. We can talk.
I think we can go many different directions with that as well, right? I think we can get ex Inter-CT coaches on. I think we can get ex Everton America coaches on. So some of the coaches that I first started working with here have gone on to do good things. One of my good friends, Andy Hill, he's now one of the managers at NCE. Freya, obviously, Freya Coombe, who used to be the girls' director here, has gone on to coach professionally and did a little bit of punditry during the World Cup for the women. So you've got stuff like that as well. And also, I would, if possible, like to get some of the high school kids on, some of the kids that have been through the program.
That'd be cool.
All the way, just to get some of their insights, some of the USL boys, maybe some of the guys some of the guys that were on your 2008 team from Tampa, just to get their insight of, I'm thinking mainly like an Emmett. Emmett's gone through every single stage with the club to get his insight onto it. And that boy works his backside off for everything that he's got. And that's the little thing that it's great hearing it from coaches, but from kids that have done it and lived it and experienced it, I think that'll be another good part. So yeah, we are trying to kind of take this to another level, and hopefully we can start doing that when it gets a little bit quieter during the winter. We can start getting these people in to get their input in as well.
Now we can talk about the weekly discussion that we have here. We were going to talk about it last week, but we had more important things to talk about last week. And also, I forgot to thank Pedro last week. Pedro texted me and he was like, oh, thanks for the recognition. But he joined late and left early, so I completely forgot about thanking him. So thanks last week, Pedro. And
good to hear he's listening. Right? Yeah. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known. So
he wouldn't have known. So
we didn't say any bad things about him, Pedro, eh?
Never. He added some of that Brazilian flair, which was needed. But the weekly discussion that we have this week, we are going to talk about some of the leagues that our teams play in Connecticut, and some of the leagues that like MLS Next or National Academy League or ECNL, what these leagues mean, what they're for, and how they, if you want to play in certain leagues like this, how you would go about it. So I can start here. We have been speaking with the EDP and some of the higher ups at EDP so that we could have a league or a couple leagues for our top teams to compete in, to where they're challenged enough and having enough success. So this year, the EDP has created for us the Zone 1 and Zone 2 Academy League for our top two teams in each age group to go and compete against clubs like FSA, Oakwood. Some are playing Beachside. But we wanted to challenge these teams and also, I guess, kind of reward them a little bit for taking this seriously and developing and progressing, so that we can play clubs like FSA that have, ECNL, MLS Next teams, or Oakwood, MLS Next. So, Tom, what do you think about this Zone 1 and Zone 2 Academy? I know it's a new league now, but
yeah, I for me, and I've told this to anybody who will listen to me, even parents, soccer in the US is just way too dilated. There's way too many leagues. There's way too many clubs trying to be Premier. There's way too many other things. So what ultimately happens is leagues try and set up fancy leagues, and everyone wants to be in this, When we first started this journey, half these leagues we're going to talk about didn't even exist. We was part of the CCSL and the NPL. And then we changed to a different one because we didn't fully support what was going on, and the CCSL was stopping, and then that's where EDP came in. So like when I first started this journey, EDP wasn't a thing in Connecticut. Since then, it's grown into New England, and it started going over everything. So, you know, there's always a new league. There's always something new, and we always try and keep ourselves in the conversations. I think one big thing before we get into the full breakdown is just understanding our mentality, and mainly mine, from doing this for the last 8 years working with Leon and Marty, is we're not a club that is going to sandbag teams. We're not going to put them in the lowest bracket and just try and have them win every game 10-0. I would much prefer them to be playing against elite teams and losing, because that is going to allow them to understand where they need to be at high school, where they need to be at college if they want to play. Because you know, I've talked to enough people, like some of my good friends in America, my American friends were like, oh yeah, I was on a state championship team, and then once I've gone out to dinner with him and we'd had a few drinks, he was like, yeah, but I sat on the bench for like 90% of the yeah, so you're not really, like, you didn't go on to college, but like the other 90% of the team that played, they all went on to college. So it's just trying to make sure that, you know, for us, if we just want to be that club on social media, oh, we won this, we beat this team by 10, we don't do that. We want to be competing. I want to be saying, okay, look at us competing against this group that has MLS Next or already has ECRL or ECNL. So, you know, that's our mentality going into it. So the Zone 1 Academy came about really about 2 or 3 years ago. We was in a meeting with EDP at the time, and the goal was to move away from CCSL, which was the Connecticut Club Soccer League, and join EDP because we wanted to set up a best of the best. What unfortunately happened is CCSL stopped. They got wind of this. They just said, well, if all of our stronger clubs are leaving, we're just going to stop the league. So the league stopped, which then ultimately made EDP just pick up everybody. So we wasn't able to get this league off the ground as early as we wanted. And then last year for the boys side, if you remember, we went through the fall season. It was just ourselves, AC, Chelsea Piers, and Ole from the south. And then we wasn't fully happy with every team in that bracket and their styles and their beliefs in how to coach kids. So we then reached out to EDP and was like, can we do something with the South and the North? And we just had to look to find another few clubs. And lucky for us, you know, there are a lot of clubs up there, and we were able to get, in my opinion, 3 of the stronger ones, you know, your FSAs, your Oakwoods, and your CFC. So, and we came away with that really strong league. It was meant to start with just the strongest groups, but then we was like, well, we don't want to do our second teams a disservice, because ultimately when we get to real regional soccer at 11v11, we want to keep growing rosters with moving players from our second team to our top team, our third team to our second team. And that's only going to help us if these kids are already experiencing that. So if you're on like an SL team in Norwalk and you're like, why am I going all the way to Oakwood? Well, we're doing that to see who's ready to make the step up when that team goes from 7v7 to 9v9, 9v9 to 11v11. Have you shown enough that you're willing to compete in that? Or have you been like, that's too hard for me? That makes our decision easier to leave you on in a lower bracket down the line. So that's where it came from. And then we had another conversation. Hey, can we get the girls involved? Got the girls involved. Then we got some of the second team girls involved as well. So I can see it continuing to grow as much as we can. The Zone 1 part is just in US Club, which is one of the governing bodies of soccer. USYS. They separate America into like 5 or 6 zones. So the Zone 1 just basically means New England. If you went to Zone 2, it would be a little bit further south. So you have the Zone 1 Academy A, which is where our strongest teams play. Zone 1 Academy B, where our second teams play. And again, the reason we went with them is so hopefully, you know, kids that are doing well playing against FSA and Oakwood and AC and those guys are ready to make that step up. And then the reason it stops at U12 is because ourselves, AC, Chelsea Piers, we go and play in the New England Academy South bracket, and your likes of CFC, Beachside, not Beachside, who else am I forgetting? Oakwood, FSA, they go and jump into the DA or whatever the Academy Platform League is, go in the opposite direction. Maybe it's ECRL, ECNL, and they go that way. So that's why it stops at U12. because we are then starting to compete outside of Connecticut. We're starting to compete more regional levels. And then if we do well in regional, we get to national championships and all across the US and get to go to those good things. So that's where that came from. It was a great opportunity to be founding members. You know, we didn't apply for that. We were selected for that. So if you could think about how many clubs are in South Connecticut and that we were out of one of 3 teams that was picked for it, wow. It's a great achievement for us to be in there. So
definitely. And, you know, the competition is very good in both of those leagues. I mean, there's everyone can touch a ball. All the teams can play, you know, very technical, very tactically smart. So, I mean, it's a great competition. And you know what? Even if we do lose, which some of our teams are doing, it's so much better. What you said, it's so much better for us. It's way more beneficial if we were to lose against, you know, a club that has, you know, USL Academy team or, you know, MLS Next teams, so that, you know, we can build our merit, we can build our programs, and we can eventually go up there and we can compete. And, you know, we have some teams that are beating these Zone 1 Academy. There you go. Tom Robinson. You can't really see him right now, but he's flexing on him.
I'm going to say my team are undefeated so far, but I do have a really good group. So
15 RL.
I've jinxed us. We'll get killed this weekend.
You know, you always jinx. You always speak a little too soon before.
But I think one thing as well I want to touch on before we move on to other leagues is I always struggle to put it into words on how we want to coach these kids moving forward. And I think Gene hit it on the head last week. We are ultimately coaching kids right now in this Zone 1 Academy for a game that they'll play 6 years down the line.
Yeah.
For a tryout that they'll have, when a college scout's watching them. That's ultimately our goal. So again, we're not going to jeopardize players' development for it. Obviously, we're always going to try and encourage our teams to win, but it's not our number one goal at the younger age. And keeping that in mind, like I nothing better. Start of this season, a dad who I coached his kid when he was U7, U8, U9, came up to me. He was like, "Has my son texted you?" I was like, yeah. I said I was so happy when he texted me. He texted me that he made finally made it onto Staples varsity team.
Cool.
And he was like, loved it. And he was like, we couldn't have done it without the development and the pathways and the strategies and the philosophies that we have at the club, because he was a kid who they were balanced teams. Then he was on the top team. Then he was on the second team. And then he gradually just kept going just because he was physically a little bit behind kids. But now once he gets to high school, his technical abilities head and shoulders above some of the other kids. Mm-hmm. And that's just because of the development. So yeah, that's much more of a win for me than my team winning Poughkeepsie last week.
Oh, for sure. And, you know, you asked last week, you had that little, you know, question, rapid fire questions. And I said, you know, one of my best moments or best memories at Inter is promoting a player from the second team to the first team. It's, you know, it's not because he was technically the best one. He was up there for sure, but he's always a player that, you know, wanted to be there, worked hard, asked questions, very coachable. And, you know, we see it with players in the 2010s. I promoted a player from the 2012s up to the first team, or actually I had kept him on the second team because he wasn't fully ready yet. And then when I passed him on to Jack Tubbs, Jack said, "Oh yeah, he's been working all summer," and promoted him to the first team right away. You know, so ultimately that's the goal. We want these players to progress. We want them to get the best competition that we can possibly provide. And, you know, if you work hard, nothing's guaranteed, but the way that this club is growing, the pathways that we have and the connections that we've made, it's always possible for players to come and move up and play in different leagues and play at different levels.
But yeah, I think one as well to touch on is when we don't always talk about our EDP teams on here, and we should do a lot more, because our EDP teams are playing in the leagues that other clubs who just have one team, that's their best team. So like Aaron's EDP team at the moment is competing against teams that's the best kids that they can get.
Right.
And that's the top team. So like what we like to talk about is kind of where our floor is and where the ceiling is. Kind of like EDP is like the the lowest that we offer into Connecticut, and you can only go up. You know, you can get onto the SL, you can get onto the RL, you can get into the regional team, you can get into the academy team. Where if we're talking about a club who's on a smaller scale than us, that's as high as they can go. EDP Championship 3 might be the highest that they ever get. Right. And that's what we want to make our families understand, is that we have so much more of a pathway for them. And we have, and again, why I want to get people on here to kind of talk about the child's journey or the players themselves. Mm-hmm. Right now in that 2010 team, we've got 2 or 3 players that were EDP players 2 or 3 years ago, SL players a few years ago, and just through hard work and determination and moving through, you know, we know what we're doing. You just got to trust the process. And those kids that are here for the long term, you know, usually that they get if you know they're working on it hard enough and going there. So don't be frustrated if you're on that EDP team. You know, the hardest thing for me and Aaron is just how these kids are all so different, physically, socially, mentally. And if you could put a blanket over them and say, hey, at 9 years old, you're all going to be able to do X, Y, and Z, it would make our lives so much easier. But that's not real life. That's not how it works. So, you know, doing it this way, you know, you do see kids who plateau. They plateau when they get to U14 because what used to work for them at U9, U10, U11 doesn't anymore because everyone's caught them up, and those smaller kids technically start taking over. So yeah, don't be frustrated if you're on that group. Your time will come, but also keep in mind you're still playing at a really good level, you know, and you're still doing really good. And you know, we have had kids who play EDP all the way through high school and then still make it into a college that they want to go to. Obviously, it might not be D1, but I would still rather play D3 at a good college than not play at all. So
yeah, well, you know, nowadays some D3 programs are beating out some D1 programs. Right. So I mean, the levels, you know, in college have not evened out, but I mean, there's quality programs throughout the country that are not just D1. Yeah. But I also think it's very important to note that, you know, whatever team your son or daughter is on, they're not stuck there per se, but they're put there to challenge them in the right way. If you have a player that's on the Zone 1 Academy, they're put there because they need to be challenged at that level. Compared to an EDP player, they're there so they can be challenged at that level. If we were to bump somebody up prematurely from EDP to Zone 1 Academy B, it could be done, no problem. But what's the quality and what's the level of their competition, and how does that reflect or impact their growth? So, for example, I have some players that come into Westport from Westport who are coming and playing in the EDP now, that completely different players from, you know, August until now. We're, you know, beginning of October basically, and they've been playing for me for a month and a half, whatever it is. They've already progressed, and you can see that. It's clear on game day, you know, because we work on so many things during training. You see it come out in the game, and you know, they're not just maturing as players, but they're maturing, you know, as people, because they are putting the work in. They're getting coached in the right way. They're asking questions, and they're being, you know, coachable in the sense that they have so many challenges that they're going and working to, or working towards, or being challenged by, but they're also having that success in playing with better players, playing with or against better teammates or teams. You know, as opposed to if I were to put somebody from Westport that I didn't think was able to do it and just put them on the SL, they would struggle. You know, it's not beneficial to the point where, you know, if I have somebody coming in who's desperate to be on a second team or a first team, but they're losing the ball every time they get it, it doesn't help anybody. You know, it doesn't help that player, it doesn't help the teammates. But if I were to, you know, drop them down to an EDP and say, hey, listen, you know, I want you to be a leader on here. I want you to play in the EDP league championship, whatever it is, level 3, what's that called?
Yeah, it depends. So yeah, your guys would be championship, and then if it's 7v7, it's futures. But yeah,
futures. So if I were to put somebody, you know, in the championship and say, hey, listen, I want you to be a leader, I want you to work hard. I want you to do the right things. And I'm challenging you in a way that, in a leadership role, one, but also, you're losing the ball and then you're working to get it back. And the next thing you do something positive. You have that balance of failure. You have that balance of success that you wouldn't have at a different, more competitive level. So I think it's important to note that, we have these tiers, not just so that we can field the best team possible, but it is designed to challenge your son or daughter in the way that they should be challenged to promote growth, if that makes sense.
100%. And then at the top end of that, we now have as part of our USL, and we do have our first, let me pull the date up to make sure I give everyone the right date. So next Sunday, the 22nd, will be our first USL event for the U10 age group, U11 and U12. The 13s and 14s are doing weekly stuff. So, we do have that again for those guys. And obviously we talked about the whole USL pathway a few podcasts ago, but ultimately we wanted to get these guys playing together more. So after conversations with Robin and Anthony Howard at AC Connecticut, we got accepted into the ECRL. So the ECRL is a step down from the ECNL. So R is for regional, N is for national, and that's the only thing. If we do well in the regional league, yes, we could easily get into the national league, and that is something that we are pushing for behind the scenes. But as of right now, we're happy with where we are. It's to step up. I still think regional league is a long shot, considering we play one team from Delaware and one team from Philadelphia. It's a pretty big region from someone who's from England, and that's pretty much the size of my country inside that area. But yeah, we had our first game a few weeks ago down in South Jersey, just outside Philly. And then this week we actually host a team from Long Island, which obviously is much more regional in my opinion. And we host them up in Danbury. We've got some players on the 2011 team. We've got quite a few more on the 2010 team. And then once we get into December, we actually are doing events that has U13 through U19. So we get to see all the age groups there. And, that is through us, realistically, at this level where kids are playing, the highest level that we can offer, and that is one of the highest levels in the US. Ultimately, if myself could redo the whole US soccer thing, I would just have all the best teams from Connecticut play against each other, all the best teams from New York playing against each other, but we're all forced into different leagues, and then realistically, no one knows which pathway is the best, right? Because MLS Next has changed drastically from what it was this time last year to what it is now, because the MLS clubs are playing more against themselves. So like Red Bulls play against New York City or DC or Revolution in New England. And the other clubs that aren't really affiliated to an MLS are playing against themselves, leaving Westchester to play against themselves, New York Soccer Club, beach sides of the world, where it's a lot less those MLS teams. So, it does change drastically because the MLS is trying to be more like the UK and like Europe, where it's free to play. So if you are on a true MLS academy, it should be free. The US have brought that rule in the last 12 months that academy soccer in the US is free. So, if you are at Red Bulls and you're being charged, that's because you're not truly on a team that is a class as an academy. You might be on a developmental team or something like that. So, that is the big difference when parents ask me, is like, hey, how do I know if my kid is being offered an academy spot? Well, they don't get charged. So our academy is through the USL. So all these kids that are playing ECRL this weekend, we've not charged them anything extra. We're doing that because it's a free service, because academy soccer in the US is now free. So that's the easiest way if you're a parent trying to, plan your way through the crazy soccer landscape. That's the easiest way to break it down. If someone's offering your kid a spot in an academy, and then they're saying, hey, where's my 4, 5, 6 grand that some clubs ask for? Then it's not a true academy, because all of our USL academy teams, even the pre-academy groups get everything for free. So it's and that is credit to, again, I know I say it a lot, but to Leon and Marty, we very well could have probably raised the tuition on that and made a lot more money as a club, but it's not what we were brought up doing. Soccer in the UK is not pay to play, and we didn't want that to be an issue. We didn't want to say, okay, here's your $3,000 to cover your normal inter team, but then we need another $3,000 to cover this. We just ate into that cost as a club, and then also the costs on top of that, covering coaches, covering expenses, getting players from Connecticut to Delaware. It's not cheap. So, that does show you that I think long term that's going to help America in the grand scheme of things, and moving players through and helping them, and don't have soccer as such as a financial restriction to get in. So I am looking forward to seeing how that goes, and then seeing how our group compete. You know what I mean? The two teams that we've played so far have done pretty well. And then seeing how when we get some of the big boys back in, get high school kids back in, get our U19 players. So, there are kids in our team right now at U19 who might not actually kick a soccer ball for Inter Connecticut, but they are Inter Connecticut players. They're hopefully going to play ECRL on a Saturday, and then on a Sunday, they'll play USL Academy. And if they can jump into an Inter game, great. But we're not going to say, hey, I'm not going to have you go and play in these two elite leagues because I need to go and beat some other team at U19. We're going to have the kids' best hopes and best interests at heart and really push those kids, which is harder for us to compete as a Inter Connecticut brand. But I think you guys are starting to understand that for us, it's all big picture. If we can promote these guys playing well and doing well and hopefully getting into college or being a pro or making it to AC Connecticut's USL team, brilliant.
And it all really is big picture. We keep saying that we're training them for the games in the future, but we have that pathway now with AC Connecticut to where we have U19 players playing academy, USL Academy. Yes, it is still branded by AC Connecticut, is still their team, but they are pulling from our players to influence and grow and make their program more competitive. So 100%. What age group and when does the USL Academy League start, and when or how can our players that are good enough join that?
Yeah, so the league's strange. We've just technically finished it, and we are now getting ready to, I believe Leon is in Tampa the second week of December. And again, not only do they use our players at AC Connecticut, but they also have our coaches. So, Leon is the assistant coach on the U19 team. He's been there the last 3 years when they've made the playoffs down in Tampa. So with this year, and then that's why we're now adding in the pre-academy side. So players can be identified by myself, by Aaron, by Anthony Quinn, by the staff at AC Connecticut. I always joke with my kids. I said, if you're going to have one bad game this year, don't make it during the AC Connecticut game.
Yeah.
We're going to record the game. We're going to share it with the coaches, and we tell AC Connecticut to nominate 2 or 3 of our guys. We do the same for them. And obviously, if you've had a bit of a bad game in that one, it's difficult to get yourselves back into the conversation. Not so much U9, U10, U11, but if you're a U17, U16 player and you don't have the greatest game, then it's difficult to get you in that next group. But yeah, that's what kind of happens. So the U16 guys do well. They practice, and then they slowly start getting brought into the U19 team once the other kids age out. So I was in a meeting last week when we was talking about the U19 teams, and we depending on where they're born, we can still bring players in. So a kid who's played for us a long time, Trevor Pegg, he's hopefully going to get the invitation. He's just got to figure out whether he can get time off from school to go down and play in the tournament in December. But again, that's another one where when they're down there, we're paying for their accommodation. We're also paying for all their meals. The only thing they have to do is get themselves to Tampa, whether that's driving, whether that's flying, whether that's walking, whatever they want to do. We cover everything else when they get there. A little bit different when we do the one in March where it's U13 and U15, because that's still more of a development side of things. But yeah, we're going down there. And yeah, Trevor's somebody if we was talking about in the beginning, he was a half field player, half goalkeeper on the second team when I first met him in 2015.
Wow.
And then since then, now he's been the starting left back for the last few years at the USL level. But
Strong as well. Doing
when
very
he
well.
played for us, he was a striker or a left or right winger. So again, that's another one. If you pigeon yourself as, oh, I'm going to be that striker, you're not going to get as far as you can in the game or at the USL level. So, we do a lot of talking as a coaching staff, as friends with AC Connecticut. We know pretty much every kid in the group. And then ultimately, like I said, those games against AC, it's good if you have a good game, because that's then going to be like, if I get Steve Carnero text me saying, who's your number 7? Who's your number 33? Then that's usually a good sign, because that's like, oh, he's been identified for that. Or, hey, Tom, I need to see your VO footage from this. It's usually, if Robin calls me, who's the main guy, or Anthony at Ace, then we know we're onto a winner. But we're honest with each other. We know their 2011s are better than ours. They know our 10s are better than theirs. And we are ultimately just trying to make the best teams. And if that has one AC Connecticut player and rest Inter, or one Inter kid and the rest AC, we don't really care. We just want this best team that we can go there, because they're representing both brands, and we do a good job of that. And there's a lot of trust in it. Like I said, Leon and Marty are personal friends with Robin and Anthony Howard, which helps. And then since that, my relationship, Aaron's relationship with the AC Connecticut coaches, Quinny's relationship has started to build from there. Rui, great guy, love Rui to pieces, AC Connecticut coach. Steve Carnero, a lot of time for him. I speak to him quite a lot, especially during tryout season. And then I know Quinny's having a good experience with Coach Danny there as well. So, we do get along. And I know you love coaching with Big Dave.
Big Dave.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
During the winter.
in Tampa. No, he's a character that, and we won, in Tampa with the U15s, and it was a great experience. It's interesting to get used to his coaching style, but great coach and great guy, and found out that he loves Norway, so we had something in common there.
There you go.
Teach him a little bit Norwegian. But I think it's important to note as well, within Connecticut, at least, we are one of the 2 clubs, us and AC Connecticut, that actually do this here. Yeah, there are some, like if you look at Ole has Select, and there's a bunch of clubs around in the area that have, select teams or winter programs, or summer select teams, stuff like that. But I think that we've found the benefit in partnering with AC, because they do have that USL franchise, and it gives us something to promote and something to work towards. And for our players, there is a clear pathway now. So I think that it's important to note that we are one of the few clubs within Connecticut that has that ability in partnership with a club that has a higher level team. And I guess it is, USL League 2 is semi-professional. So, it's a way to get in, and, hopefully for the select few get paid to play soccer as their job.
Yeah, maybe it was my dream, and I never managed to pull it off. But, if you don't make it, maybe you can follow me and Aaron into coaching. So
we always have spots. I need an assistant. But I think that's it for us today. We have to get ready to go and coach. But again, thanks everybody for listening. If you are listening, and if you do listen and enjoy the podcast, we would like everybody to share this with people, share this with players and families that could benefit from the information that we share. Or if you just like to laugh at, me and Coach Tom for, I guess, making a fool out of ourselves with some of the jokes that we make, or, whether I make sense or not, that's up for you guys to decide. But, again, thanks for listening, and, hopefully we get to do more of these. But to promote the Extra Time podcast, or the Extra Time program, we included that the discount code, which is capital P podcast 10. And again, numbers are limited for that. So if you wanted to go and join, look at the program right away, see what we have at SPU, and hopefully, if you want to, there's enough space for your son or daughter to join. Anything else that you wanted to add, Tom, before we sign off here?
Perfect. Appreciate everyone listening. Again, podcast 10, capital P for that discount. I expect it to sell out, so make sure you get on it soon. And any questions, reach out to myself and Aaron, and we can cover them in the next podcast when we have special guest Marty Walker.
Marty Walker.
I was going to say, if they don't understand you, mate, they've got no chance with Marty in the next one. So.
Marty Walker.
Yeah, we'll have to get subtitles on, which will be hard for them.
Yeah. But anyway, thanks again for listening, and I will see all of you either this week or you will hear me through your audio device next week. All right.
See you later, guys.
See you soon. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Interview Podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on Facebook and Instagram, and check out our website, www.interctfc.com.